Good afternoon, and welcome to the Candidate Forums 2020. I'm Matthew Mandell, Executive Director of the Westport Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the Chamber and the Westport Library, we invite you to these forums, the first of two that we will be holding, the first one for state representatives, the second for state senators next week. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Bill Harmer, the Executive Director of the Library.
Thank you, Matthew. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Bill Harmer, Executive Director of the Westport Library. We're pleased to partner once again with the Westport-Weston Chamber of Commerce to bring you the Candidate Forum with Westport State Representatives. This year, because of the pandemic, we unfortunately cannot invite you inside the beautiful space at the library to listen to the debate and ask questions of the candidates. Nevertheless, we're pleased to play host and accommodate this year's debate via the Zoom platform. Did you know that there are more than 9,000 public libraries across the United States? That's more than McDonald's restaurants. In surveys, libraries rank amongst the most trusted institutions in America. They assist with the census and offer voter registration services. They are open to everyone. They are nonpartisan and they are free. Therefore, it is absolutely appropriate and essential for us to facilitate debates like this in a nonpartisan forum with the Chamber. And on November 3rd, the Westport Library will serve once again as a trusted and safe polling place for our community. No matter who you're voting for in November, ladies and gentlemen, please get out to vote. I want to thank you all for being here and best of luck to each of our candidates. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much, Bill. We appreciate you helping us out, as you always do with so many of the events that we run with the library. So being able to vote is probably the most important part of this. It's all well and good to listen to what the candidates have to say and figure out who you're going to vote for. But if you can't vote, then it really doesn't matter. That's why I have today here with us Patty Strauss, the town clerk, to tell us how we're able to vote in Westport, either by absentee ballot or in person. Patty Strauss, town clerk.
Hi, thank you, Matthew, and hello, candidates. I am very busy in my office right now. I'm going to give you some numbers. Of course, this is the first year that we've ever been able to issue mail-in ballots, used to be called absentee ballots, for any voter of interest because of the COVID pandemic. Right now, I want you to know we had our first set of absentee ballots mailed out as of October 2nd. And so far, we have had 7,823 ballots mailed out to our voters. Total voter population in Westport is 19,815. So that's a 40%, 30 days or 28 days out right now from the election, which is a very high number. I do want to tell you, though, that a lot of our questions from our voters are, if I get an absentee or mail-in ballot, can I still go to the polls? And the answer is yes, as long as you don't vote that paper ballot and return it to the town clerk's office. And what that's giving the voter, some voters have said, well, what if there's a breakout of the pandemic and I don't want to go, it gets worse and I don't feel comfortable going November 3rd? Or what if I wake up the morning of November 3rd and I don't feel well? So getting an absentee ballot now or mail-in ballot, you don't have to vote it and you will still be able to go to the polls November 3rd if you feel up to it. If you don't, the absentee ballots or mail-in ballots are, for the first time, have a postage paid envelope for you to return your ballot by mail. And also for the first time, there is an official ballot drop box located at the rear entrance of Town Hall if you wish to keep your ballot out of the post office and return it directly to Town Hall. I also want to introduce to you the state online lookup program, which is online that allows you to verify whether your ballot has been returned or not. It allows you to look up yourself and know where your polling place is. And it is something that I recommend to all voters to get used to. And it's called the online lookup tool. If you Google that, you'll be able to find that through Connecticut. And finally, the last thing I'd like to say is that ballots cannot be delivered to the polling place on election day. If you have a ballot, you want to vote it on election day, you can go into the polls and vote, but the polling place will not accept a ballot from you, a paper ballot. You must deliver your paper ballot to the official drop box at Town Hall. Thank you for having me, and good luck to all the candidates.
Thank you very much, Patty. So now you know how to vote. That's the most important part. The next, of course, is who are we going to vote for? So let me introduce the candidates that we have before we go into the debate. Before we want to do it, I want to introduce you to Jennifer Keller, who I have in my upper left-hand corner, member of the library, and she's the driver of this event. We'll make sure that it's being run smoothly and checking on things. She's also our timer. So you will see how much time is left for each person who's speaking. So let me introduce everybody who's here, and in alphabetical order. We have Jonathan Steinberg, Democrat, incumbent, who represents the 136th district of Connecticut, which is most of Westport. His challenger is Chip Stevens, Republican, who's also vying for the 136th. We have Stephanie Thomas, a challenger, who would be representing the 143rd district, and that represents part of Westport, Norwalk, and Wilton. And also as a challenger, Patrizia Zucaro, who is a Republican, who will be running also for the 143rd. Why are they both running? Because the incumbent, Gail Lavielle, has decided to step down. I want to thank Ms. Lavielle for her 10 years of wonderful service to her district and to the state of Connecticut. She was a wonderful representative, and we wish her well in her next endeavor. So now we know who the candidates are. Let's go for a little of the ground rules and how it will work. Each one will have an introduction, and then we will go to questions of each one. And they will be able to rebut each other, and then there'll be an open discussion that will be moderated by myself. I'd like to make a declaration at this point. I am a member of Westport's Democratic Town Committee, but today that hat is not on my head. I am clearly going to be the moderator of a fair and even debate, and wanted to disclose that in case anybody had any questions. So let's go to the, and also everybody gets a final closing remarks. So let's start off before we do lots, and Mr. Steinberg will go first. He has 1.5 minutes to give his introduction. And if everybody could keep their screens during the debate on gallery view, then you'll see everybody, because when we go to the rebuttals and we go to the discussion part, you'll be able to see everybody. But during the openings and the closings, we'll be pinning everybody for everybody, but it's best if you stay on gallery view for the rest of the debate. Mr. Steinberg.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce and to the library for hosting this event. This debate is particularly important every election, and I'm very pleased to participate in it. You know, I love Westport as much for its values as all of its wonderful amenities. We're a community of compassion and commitment to our families, to our careers, and to our community. And I'm very proud to have represented this district for the past 10 years. I grew up in Westport, Staples 74. My 3 kids went through the school system. We came back to town because of it's a wonderful community. And it's because of that that I chose to invest myself into being a public servant. I've long worked to make Westport better. I am a co-founder of the Westport Cinema Initiative, now the Remarkable Theater, because we know that builds community. More recently, since my years on the RTM3 as deputy moderator, I've served Westport as its state legislator. I'm now chair of the Public Health Committee. It's a particularly critical role because of where we are today. COVID has changed the landscape. It has changed our lives. You have my commitment, my pledge, that I will continue to work very closely with the administration to look out for Westport's interests, its businesses, its schools, and to help us navigate our way through this. And I look forward to the further conversation during this debate, which will hopefully illuminate some of the issues that matter most to Westporters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Patrizia Zucaro.
Hi, good afternoon. First, I would like to thank Chamber of Commerce and the library for hosting this event. Thank you so much. I also want to give a great thanks to Patty as well for that great information. During this time, it's with such uncertainty, it was really great to hear the options available for voting, and I think it's very important that everybody gets out and vote. I'm so excited to be here. As you mentioned before, I'm running for state representative of the 143rd, which comprises portions of Westport, Norwalk, and Wilton. As a lifelong Fairfield County resident, I know how much Connecticut has to offer. In recent years, Connecticut has failed to reach its full potential as a great place to live, work, raise a family, and retire. Some of my priorities are local control of education and zoning, repairing the state's finances, and aiding small businesses. I'm running for office because I want to use my experience as an attorney to help change that and to empower local communities to be the very best that they can be. I've also been endorsed by the Independent Party, and I believe that that's important because I'm an independent thinker with an independent voice. I'm focused on Westport, Wilton, and Norwalk, and the local issues that matter most to them. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Thomas.
Hi, thank you also to the Chamber for having us in the library. I'm not a member of this chamber, but I am a proud member of the Norwalk Chamber, so I appreciate all the work you've both been doing during this pandemic. It's been great. I am a business owner. I was not born here, but I did move here 8 years ago. And since that time, I've been very involved with the community. And I don't know any business owner who has not lost a few nights' sleep or maybe shed a few tears as we grapple with this new reality. I confess I know I have, because my baby that I nurtured from nothing is in trouble. And, you know, many of us were struck with this new reality overnight. But what this has reminded me is that people who start their own businesses are innovators, they're entrepreneurs, we are flexible, we stay nimble, we make changes because we have to, we're forward thinking, not past thinking. And that reminded me exactly why I got involved and why I'm running for office in the first place. We need that spirit in government. I am not about politics. I am about people. I am about governance over politics. We need that innovative spirit. We need urgency. We need action to drive change. And that's what I stand for. And I can't wait to tell you more.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stevens, the final introduction. You're on mute.
Now I'm not.
Yep, good.
Okay. Thank you, Matt, and thank you to the Chamber for having this debate today. Appreciate it. And all those that are here attending. We're glad to be here with you. Hopefully we'll be together live again soon. I am Chip Stevens. I have lived in this town for about 50, 60 years. I've had the honor of serving this town on the P&Z as a commissioner, as a secretary, and as chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I also have had the honor and blessings of going to school here all my years. And then my 5 children and stepchildren also attended schools here. So I'm very aware of everything that goes on in this community. I want you to know that this election is a local election that we're talking about today. There's a national election going on also, but as Tip O'Neill said years ago, all politics are local. And I look at local issues, and I hope to give some solutions to some of the challenges we have. Challenges like the state taking away a lot of our autonomy in terms of education, in terms of land use, and many other things which we'll get into in this discussion. And I'll look forward to speaking with everybody and their issues. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, now we're getting into the questions. There are going to be 8 questions. The first, and most of them were drawn from the Board of Directors from the Chamber of Commerce, as well as from the CBIA, which is the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, I'm sorry. And so they gave me some questions as well. They have been intricately involved in these debates over the years, and they were helping out as well. So the first question goes to Ms. Zucaro. And obviously the biggest thing that we have in front of us today is the pandemic. So the question is, how do you feel the state has handled the COVID-19 crisis so far? what changes, if any, would you make to help stem the tide of illness while at the same time bolstering businesses?
Hi, okay, good. Thank you for the question. The virus has literally stopped us from our daily routines and social interactions. The shutdown has disproportionately hurt small businesses and communities that don't have pools in their backyard. And so we need to be sensitive to that fact, and we need to address this through transparency, information, and fact-based research. Generally speaking, I think that Connecticut has handled COVID very well. There has been, a serious lack of communication into transparency from the governor's office. His approach of do it alone really doesn't work for us in this state. We need to have more transparency and more input from the legislatures, the agencies that are surrounding us, so that we could truly understand the impact of COVID and work from there. I'd like to see some of the placement, I would like to see some of the changes that were made for businesses to stay permanent, some of the temporary things that worked for businesses to stay there. So again, there's been a lot of good stuff, and we need to really focus on what have been the positives and what have been the cons, and work towards that based on evidence and factual data, and create reasonable solutions to those. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So now we're going to go to our rebuttal section, which is 30 seconds each. Again, we'll stay in the same order. Ms. Thomas?
30 seconds, not a lot of time. I would just say that obviously it's not evenly applied across every industry, but I think our positivity rate speaks for itself. What Governor Lamont has had to do is make hard choices. People in my industry have been hit hard. And so I don't say it lightly, but the number one thing we need to keep the economy going is consumer confidence. And you can't rebuild that with a spiking rate.
Thank you. Yeah, made it within the 30 seconds. Now we'll go to Mr. Stevens. 30 seconds.
Matt,
Yes,
you're frozen.
I'm frozen.
Okay, that's better. Is it my turn?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
Internet,
Thank you
that's
very much.
some of the issues with the Zoom we'll get over.
Just as a background reminder, my background in education was as a master's degree in microbiology. I've dealt with viruses and bacteria over my career. And I think, I got to give kudos to the governor because we have a good rate. I do express the same concern as Patrizia in that I believe the houses of the government have not been participating, and I think that's awesome. I do think that we've got to work out of knowledge and not fear, and there's been too much fear mongering, and I think we have to have more proven science to make decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Steinberg, 30 seconds.
Thank you. I think the governor has done an excellent job considering how challenging the circumstances are. Nobody has all the answers. And I'll disagree. The legislature has been directly involved. Even if we're not making those ultimate decisions that are done via executive orders, we're involved. I'm on calls with the governor's office every week with the Department of Public Health. We inform our colleagues about what's going on. I'm telling you that it's the executive branch that's best suited to have the agility and flexibility to meet the real-time needs. Nothing is going to be perfect. We're all trying to figure this out. But I think for starters, the governor's done an excellent job.
Ms. Zucaro brought up an interesting point where she said she wanted to make some of the things that have changed permanent. What would be some of those? Anybody want to discuss that?
I wouldn't mind. One of the things we've seen in healthcare is the use of telehealth as an effective means to provide care for people who don't have access to their primary providers. This is something that we've been a little bit wary about actually doing more of in the state, and we've learned this is a critical tool for access, and I think it's something that's going to be a permanent change to the way we deliver care in the state.
Mr. Stevens, you raised your hand.
Yes, I'd like to bring up the fact that many of the things we supposedly learned in this epidemic are lessons we learned throughout life. Personal space, washing your hands, all these things have been pushed in public health for years but forgotten. So I think it's got to be a lot of education here. I'd also like to see instituted opt-out testing. So whenever you visit the hospital, your doctor, your dentist, whatever, testing would be done then. And I think that would be very important. Having testing around like it has been that's what I would reinforce. Keep the testing going, but make it more opt-out so that you're going to get it all the time. That's it.
All right, Ms. Zucaro, you were the one who brought it up. So what were the specific things you'd want to see stay?
Yeah, I think that some of the business processes were a little bit more streamlined. And I also think what was really great is real estate transactions, which I'm familiar with. We had some different processes in place for notaries and things like that when we weren't able to meet in person. So we were a little bit more flexible in allowing businesses to do their transactions and to do their job without putting such red tape in the way.
And
Ms. Thomas, go ahead.
Yeah, I just love the flexibility as well. I do think the agility that we showed, I know locally at the municipal level on the zoning commission, we were able to make some changes very quickly with restaurants, parking, etc. Just keeping that agility and again, eye toward innovation. We have all learned things don't have to be exactly as we thought they had to be for these past many decades. And if we keep that spirit, we're in much better shape.
All righty. Well, that went pretty smoothly for a debate, or as debates we've seen lately. So, Ms. Thomas, we're going to stay with you with the next question, and we're going to stay with COVID. So many people have felt economically insecure during COVID-19 pandemic. What are some actions you would take in office in order to mitigate the economic impact of COVID-19 as it had on many Connecticut families and businesses?
You know, COVID has been tricky in the sense that every single person has had a different reaction to the environment. And I think that's what's been so challenging from a business perspective. You have people who have left jobs that they loved because they felt unsafe going back. Teachers, nurses, etc. You have had people in certain businesses thriving, real estate. I door knock a lot, and in the same 10-minute span, I spoke to someone the time distracted me. So anything we can do to build that confidence, one thing I know has come up, and I think it would be really interesting to consider, is if we can do another sales tax free week like we do for back to school, but maybe for the holidays. Something to coax people out safely, of course, but that can help stimulate the economy as well.
All right, thank you. Mr. Stevens, rebuttal.
Yes, I'd agree with most of the speakers right now. I think, again, you know, with the background in this, I think there's been a lot of fear mongering and a lot of people looking at, you got to listen to science, you got to do science. Science is a study. It's a study based on, you know, hypothesis and then proving things. We have got to have a more centralized information dissemination so people really understand what's going on. We've been through pandemics and epidemics before, and I really have to question some of the things that are being put out to the public. So I think we really got to make people feel better about getting out, coming outside again. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to Mr. Steinberg.
It's a real challenge. It's getting colder. We're going to be moving back inside. People are frustrated and getting lax. I think there's a lot of risk inherent there. One thing government can do is be very clear about communicating the guidelines. There's not a one size fits all, but it's very important that we help local businesses figure out what works for them. I'm also working on a large jobs program I've been pitching the governor's office based upon the old federal WPA program, putting people back to work, fixing our aging infrastructure, transportation, energy, water, and housing. Hopefully it'll lift all boats by putting a lot of people back to work. So we got to get creative about it.
All right, finally, Ms. Zucaro.
Thank you. I think safety must remain paramount. We need to continue to balance data-driven public health imperatives with economic and social considerations. And we need to do that with bipartisanship. COVID has exacerbated our structural deficiencies, but with bipartisan work, we can reduce structural spending, renegotiate state contracts, union contracts. We can reduce unfunded liabilities, streamline government, optimize technology, halt non-essential borrowing, and so on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So let's continue to stay with that and talk about it. What about the average everyday person who's lost their job? What can we do to help them out during this? The government, the feds are still, tied up as to whether they're going to extend $600, $400. What do you think the state might be able to do with that? Anybody?
I mean, I think it's obvious the feds have to do something. But, there are some things the state can do to hopefully bridge a gap until the politics get out of DC as well. But, one thing I know has been really instrumental for our family, my husband's company participates in Connecticut's shared work program. So just making sure funding for something like that continues, it allowed them to avoid layoffs. They did not have to lay off one employee. And that was transformative for everybody at the company. So just keeping in mind, sometimes it's not a big fix, but just incremental things can help make a difference.
Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, again, I'm blessed to live in Westport where we have a unique population, and many of the people in Westport are struggling with the closings of schools and the inability to have their children taken care of. So I think that, again, we've got to get back to being very specific and very targeted in how people understand this disease. I'm not going to make any statements out, but I think one thing the towns could do, and again, I see this as a local election. It doesn't need to be the feds. It doesn't need to be the state. The state has to give the towns the permission, the help, the allowance to be more flexible in local decisions in opening schools, possibly closing schools, or having some kind of alternative available for childcare. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Steinberg.
I'm going to disagree a little bit. I think that the state has done a lot to enable municipalities to be flexible and to do things that fit their community. And I'm also going to disagree. I think the federal government has let us down. The PPP program was essential early on to keep people employed and compensated. They had basically dropped the ball because of partisan bickering, and we're all going to pay the price for that. The states are bearing that burden. I think the biggest issue we have is making sure that people have a pathway to return to work. Let's be frank, some of these jobs are not going to return. So we need to work very collaboratively in an innovative fashion with local businesses to figure out what they need in order to repurpose their businesses in a fashion that will put people back to work. And also consider the fact a lot of people have lost their healthcare insurance. We have to find ways to fund that to protect the social and healthcare safety.
For blanket forgiveness of PPP for businesses under a certain size.
Yeah, go ahead.
Matt, if I could retort. Again, the state has been very on top of local authorities in terms of our legal people, our police force, on top of trying to regionalize us. I think the towns need more autonomy to have the way to keep people working. We don't have a lot of childcare here in town. We do have a lot of people that don't lose their job. They can work virtually. They do work virtually. Need somebody to got to be more attuned to keeping people that are older and adept to immune problems away from kids. That can be done. That's planning. That's putting something together. It's not throwing money at it, and it's not a knee-jerk reaction like some of the things I'm hearing.
Mr. Zucaro.
Yeah, if I could jump in, thank you. I just want to raise really quick awareness here. I'm sure everybody is aware is that, there's two things that are really impeding Connecticut's ability to sort of go after some of these things. And one of the biggest things here is our enormous unfunded liabilities. I mean, we have to pay attention to what's going on with the state employee unions and making sure that we are in line with reasonable and realistic options here. And I think that for years, we haven't been in touch with that, and we've been allowing the unions to take advantage of the taxpayers. And so we've been in a situation where we have unfunded liabilities, and that prevents us from taking some of that money and investing it back into these things that we all want. And so if we could just, focus a little bit more on making sure we can reduce the union contracts, then I think we would be in better shape, and we would allow the flexibility to some of our smaller businesses. We would be able to give back to them and all these other great investing, great policies we would like to invest in. Thank you.
So are you suggesting a new tier? What do you mean by that?
A new tier of what exactly?
Of a pension?
No, I'm suggesting that we need to have better contract negotiations. We need to be able to set standards that are reasonable. We have unions that are getting 6.5% annual escalation. I mean, not annual, but they're getting 6.5% raises, where the regular private sector is not seeing that. So we need to be able to negotiate better on behalf of our taxpayers. And I get it. The state union employees are taxpayers, but they're only 2%, and 98% of the remaining population in Connecticut is paying for their raises and their salaries.
I guess what I'm asking, tiers 3 and 4 are fully funded, so the unfunded portion are coming from pensions that started back in 1984. That's 75% of the debt that we're talking about. So are you suggesting, so the latest 2 tiers, they've already done things like change the retirement age, more penalties to opt out early, so many different regulations. So are you suggesting that it's a hybrid plan, defined benefit and defined contribution? So are you saying we need to create a tier 5 that would somehow, and what would those changes be from tiers 3 and 4?
We need to tighten our negotiation skills, and we need to make sure that we're planning properly for the future.
Yes, I think also we got to stop getting ourselves into 10-year contracts. That was just a ridiculous thing to pass. What's going to happen in 2 years, we can't be, ready for. We are bleeding in this state. We've got to stop being on the brink of bankruptcy. We've got to stop stealing from our fair weather fund, as we did in June, to
So
take
are you
1.8
suggesting we
Let Mr. Steinberg go on this
billion
one.
out of the fair weather fund for these mandates, these 10-year contracts? I'm with you, Patricia. I think we've got to have much harder negotiation, and quite frankly, I think we have to review those things that have been passed already. Other states have done it. We can too.
My final comment on this, Mr. Steinberg.
I have to agree with Stephanie. I'm former chair of the Pension Sustainability Commission. I've delved into this subject. Most of the problems we have were based upon contracts that were signed a long time ago. We were left in an impossible situation of balloon payments that should never have been created in the first place. I agree, our negotiating of contracts was horrific. We've smoothed things out as best we can given the circumstances. We are, as Stephanie pointed out, with prospective employees, we're in a much better shape. Unfortunately, we're left with a legacy liability that is dragging our state down because of fixed costs. I agree that when we reach the end of these contracts, we need to negotiate better. We also have to recognize these fixed costs are here to stay and find other ways to balance our budget.
All right, thank you. That was a nice civil discourse. I enjoyed that, and I hope everybody else did as well. Mr. Stevens, we're going to go to a question for you, and we're going to move away from COVID at this point and start
Great.
picking up on different parts of what's going on in our state. So there is legislation moving through both the House and the Senate that would usurp local zoning authority and attempt to remove single-family homes and zoning. What do you see as the impact of such a move on local towns' infrastructure and taxes?
This speaks exactly to one of my 4 pillars that I am running on, and that is state intrusion on local autonomy and local decisions. This movement towards eliminating single-family housing zoning, not houses, Matt, zoning, it's unacceptable. Add to that, not allowing local police and fire to testify in our decisions at planning and zoning. In addition to that, taking away the word character in any judgments on what we do, and add to that regionalization, where there's a 15-mile radius put around a town where other towns are able to come in and comment and help make decisions. These are an abomination. These are things that were contained in a bill that was turned down earlier this year. It was accepted by our local representatives. Luckily, it was turned down in the Senate. This is looming over us. It has been a constant threat as to it might come up in the June session or this past September or the October session, emergency sessions. That hasn't happened, but it will come back, and most likely in January. Add to that the Anwar bill, where it even gets even more heinous in terms of taking away local autonomy. Hey, look, folks, Westport has done its job in terms of managing its budget, taking care of unfunded mandates. There's ways to do it. You can change things. Nothing is ever impossible. If it is impossible, we shouldn't be serving as representatives. So yes, I am very afraid, and I want to represent this town because it's done many good things. We have lots of beautiful, affordable housing here, and that's what this is all targeted at. These are all things that Westport has used in its defense against the heinous 830G legislation. These are things that we need. We need to be able to talk about our character. We need to have our own zoning rules. And
Finish up, Mr. Stevens, please.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Steinberg, rebuttal.
Well, I find I end up agreeing a lot with my opponent on this. I don't think the state should be dictating where affordable housing belongs in our community. Zoning decisions should be made primarily locally. If the state's going to do anything, it should be offering incentives like the Home Connecticut program we were able to fund because of deficits. We really need to look very carefully at our ability to create inclusive zones. I think we've done a great job. I'll even give kudos to my opponent. Westport has really stepped up, and we should be proud of our efforts recently. We want more housing diversity. We can do this ourselves.
But
Thank
Mr.
you.
Steinberg, why then did you vote
No,
for
this is
that
not
bill?
rebuttal. Yeah, no, this is not discussion. We can hit that later, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you.
Ms. Zucaro, rebuttal.
I agree with the rest of the panels here, particularly Chip. And I think that what is really important here is that having these zonings, the zoning authority be taken away from the local municipality will have effects on our community. And I think most importantly, we have environmental, historical preservation, landscaping, architectural, and accessibility impacts. And I think that only people at the local level would be able to have the most, will be able to have the best information for that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ms. Thomas.
I call BS. Even the question is a false construct. If I had a dime for every senator that has a bill drafted, I could bail out the country. It's a bill. There's a million of them. But that aside, let's assume it does come up in 2021. I totally agree. But what no one has alluded to is that Westport's P&Z is already ahead of the state. And I doubt anyone here has actually taken the time to call the senator or call Sauerbrunn. And guess what? They were surprised to hear what Westport and Fairfield County are doing. They are hoping to learn from us. I'll leave it there because time is up. But
All right, well, thank you. So Chip, you did have something to say to Jonathan, so why don't we
Yes.
pick up at that point?
Thank you very much, Matt. Yes, I'd ask Jonathan why he voted for such a bill that, would, put all this on us the first time. And I'd like to know what he's thinking about voting again when it does come up, because we know it will come up probably in January. Look, Westport is ahead of the mark. Westport is not given credit for much of the living that we've provided affordably. I challenge anybody to walk into Hales Court, to Sasko Creek, to Canal Park and see the kind of living situations that we've created. We've created the IHC. Yes, we've done it. Then take this burden of 830G off of us, which doesn't give us credit for all of this. We have done well locally. Our first selectman's done great with budgeting. P&Z's done great, I believe, with zoning. And yes, we are ahead of the state of Connecticut, but these things still loom heavily over us. And I think that we need to look at what Westport's done and hopefully impress it on other towns. Thank you.
if I could just say, I agree with you that we are ahead of the curve, but I think it's important to really recognize that Fairfield County is in the minority in Hartford. So it's a matter of strategy. In terms of sheer numbers, it's a matter of strategy that we have to get ahead of these things versus just kind of chicken little, the sky is falling. Your P&Z has already been in touch to bring to their attention what has been happening. And guess what? That led to a dialogue. And those are the types of things that would make something like this not go forward. I'm on my zoning. Obviously, I believe in local control, and anyone watching from Norwalk will tell you that we can't even apply the same standard from South Norwalk to East Norwalk. So I don't imagine it could be done ever on a statewide level. It just doesn't make sense. Sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Well, I think if Chip wants to bring in my record, he has to look at the entire record. I have introduced bills year after year, often with Republican colleagues, to amend 830G to make other forms of housing eligible for the moratorium. And I also view the character issue as a red herring, a dog whistle used by extremists on both examples. Let's call character what it is. It's a very subjective term. We should be focusing on the specifics of criteria for local zoning, smart growth principles, infrastructure and the like, not get hung up on things like character, which are on the eye of the beholder. Let's focus on things that will create a more diverse community with housing options for young people, for seniors who want to stay retired here, to our firefighters and policemen, our teachers, for young families. That's what we should really be doing. And I think we're actually doing a fairly good job on that. And we're also opposing the bad projects. And I disagree with the state judge who has approved a couple projects that are just too dense and inappropriate for us. So overall, I think that we can make 830G better and focus on incentives because it's a sledgehammer approach that's based on being punitive.
Matt,
Thank you.
if I could.
Chip, you want? Yeah, go ahead, Chip.
Yeah, I'd have to push back on my opponent, as the state, in its great wisdom, gave us $500,000 to make a village overlay district here in Westport, which saved a lot of our downtown and the character of this town. I spearheaded that. I got it through. We now have a district that does that. So at one hand, you say, you know, we're going to give you all this money to protect the character of the town. And then on the other side, you're going to say, you know, this is important. It's an important issue. Absolutely. And all the other things that are involved are too. But I really would like to take a straw poll here, if anybody's amenable, and just raise your hand. Are you willing to vote against this if it comes up again in the state legislature?
What is this?
100%. Yeah, I agree, Chip, because the thing is that we keep saying that you guys are opposed to state mandated, but at the same time, you want to talk about how you're gonna have our Fairfield County is without exception, and the rest of the state needs to look at its zoning. Well, if you're going to include the rest of the state, you're going to include Fairfield County, and that Fairfield County has been a great example of zoning, and we think about our zoning and we're paying attention to our zoning. And of course, one thing about character, I think character is important, right? We have independence in our community, and it's gone back for years, and that's through not only the design and the architectural features of our community, right? That all plays into a role. It is about distinguishing Westport from Fairfield, from Norwalk. And that is one of the reasons why zoning is so important to a community. It's also important because of our traffic. It's also important because of our environmental, in preserving natural landscape. It's important for a number of reasons. And one size fits all at a state level to correct some eastern part of Connecticut isn't going to help us here in Fairfield County. And we need to be paying attention to this because this is a very important thing. Where we live, work, and play is important. And of course we need diversity of housing. I am a complete proponent of that. And we have to work, right? Wilton, I believe, in my district, they spent over $200,000 in developing a redevelopment plan that would permit all different types of zoning. So we are aware of the different types of zoning, and we are looking for ways to do it. And having the state dictate to us what we can and cannot do is going to completely change where we live and work and play. Sorry.
Well, I think we thrashed that one out pretty well. All right, Mr. Steinberg, last question for the first round. With a decrease in driving due to the pandemic and the increase in use of alternative energy cars, there has been a decrease in income derived from the gas tax. What can we now be done to tackle our crumbling road infrastructure, and would that include tolls?
Well, there are a few things more important to reviving Connecticut's economy and having us a vibrant player in New England's future than dealing with our transportation infrastructure, which is decrepit. It's at the end of its useful life. And every year, the Republicans block efforts to invest in it, to fund it, lead to the prospect of a disaster. I don't like bringing up the Manistee River Bridge, but we're making it more possible with every year. I thought the debates on tolls was disinformation to a large degree. I believe that there's nothing we can do that's more important than put people back to work, to fix our transportation infrastructure, our energy infrastructure. Our grid is ancient, our water infrastructure, our wastewater management system is falling apart, and even housing. To do that, yeah, somebody's going to have to pay for it. If you want to partner with third parties, they're going to want a return on the investment. That means tolls. They can be congestion pricing tolls. They can be variable tolls. These are things that other states are doing. Virtually every other state that wants to do anything about its transportation infrastructure is doing this kind of thing. We need to invest in our future. We're going to compete. And right now, we've got a bunch of Republicans who are just blocking the road, who don't want to do anything, who do not have serious answers. And every year that we do not address this, it increases our risk significantly. So yeah, I believe in tolls. I believe in a lot of things that are going to make Connecticut's future brighter and create jobs in this state. And infrastructure is critical.
All right, thank you. All right, now it's time for rebuttal. Ms. Zucaro.
I would just like to interject firstly that the legislature is predominantly Democrat. So if they're having an issue passing something, it would probably be because they're arguing amongst themselves. The Republicans are in a minority and they're not necessarily a roadblock. I do think that, in the time of COVID, we really need to understand how this is going to impact our transportation and our roads because people are working from home. So I'd like to see a little bit more research and gathering a little bit more evidence and fact based on this new traffic patterns. As far as tolls, I'm generally not for tolls unless we can we can get our spending under control.
All right, thank you. Now we go to Ms. Thomas.
In my fundraising career, I often have to ask clients if they believe that fundraising is math or magic. And I've heard this toll, like we want to pay for our infrastructure, but it seems like magic is expected as the way to pay for it instead of math. Bonding, we have heard again and again about how we can't kick the can on pensions, but apparently we can on tolls. The transportation fund is going to be insolvent by 2022. We don't have time anymore for studies and whatnot. We have to move on. Sorry.
Thank you. And Mr. Stevens.
Yes, I'd just like to remind everybody that it's a well-known fact that tolls are the most regressive tax that can be. They affect everybody equally, the poor, the extremely poor, and the extremely rich. That's why tolls have been shunned, also for safety purposes. Instead of tolls, let's look at properly spending. Why does the state continue to try to throw $4 million at the Krabari Bridge in Westport? Because they want to bypass for the future tolls. We have got to look more specifically at things that are proposed and things that are being done and spend properly. And I think then we will have our infrastructure on a good start.
All right, thank you. I would throw in, what about the possibility of just tolling trucks? I went through Rhode Island recently, and all they do is only toll trucks that are doing business, such as if you have business in Connecticut, come on in, you don't get tolled. But if you're just driving through, why not toll it? Is that a possibility, Mr. Steinberg? You had raised your hand.
Thank you. Yes, when I first came into the legislature, that was precisely the idea I had. Let's toll trucks. And that's what the governor said when he first came in. It doesn't generate enough money to meet the need. Our needs are so acute because we've waited so long to try to address them. I do believe in rebates for low-income people. I believe in frequent flyer for people who have to commute on a regular basis. There's a lot of flexibility. We can't reduce tolls to a black and white issue. It is the critical means by which most states and other countries fund transportation infrastructure investments. There is simply no replacement, and bonding it, which is what the Republicans say, is contrary to their core principles of not overextending our debt service, which is now $50,000 for each individual Connecticut citizen. So you got to be absolutely reasonable and fair about how you're going to fund this.
Jonathan, there you go again. You're saying impossible, you're saying can't be done. Anything can be done with the proper planning and thought process. Let me remind you also, many more people might be in favor of this if the state kept their promise on lockboxes. Put a lockbox on something like this where it can't possibly any way be taken from the funding for infrastructure and highway. People might be more amenable. But we have not respected any lockbox in any of our things here in the state of Connecticut.
That's just not true. It's not true.
We
We have
Jonathan,
a
they
lockbox.
just took 100
You don't take money out of it. It's what you put into it that you're really talking about here. But stop blaming the lockbox. And you stop. Republicans have used lockboxes an excuse for doing nothing year after year after year. When are you going to take responsibility instead of saying you can do anything? You actually have to do something.
All right, guys, let's hear from Ms. Thomas now.
I mean,
Right.
not only did lockboxes already pass, but in every year, I forget how long Jonathan may know, the transportation fund has had to borrow from the general fund. So it's not like the money's escaping. We have not been able to fund our infrastructure and transportation for many, many years. But that's not what I was going to say. I go to New York all the time. I visit family in New Jersey all the time, or Massachusetts, and I have to pay for the privilege. Yet when they come, they don't have to. The beauty of electronic tolls is that you can pinpoint with accuracy who pays the bill. I don't see any reason not to tax out-of-state drivers, or I don't even call it a tax, it's a user fee. I pay a fee to use the train. They should pay a fee to use the road when they're traveling through the state. We don't have to charge residents if we don't want to, and so on. You can't just cut enough to be prosperous, and you can't raise revenue all the time from one source. You have to meter it out over a large body of options, and tolls as a user fee for people like trucks, out-of-state drivers, that would be probably about half, 500 million. Where else is that going to come from?
Ms. Zucaro?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to talk briefly about the transportation fund. So, the transportation fund, actually, we've been funneling in DOT salaries into the special transportation fund. We should be moving that over to the general fund. So we are misallocating some of the funds here, for starters. And then second of all, the gas tax. No one has mentioned the gas tax, and the gas tax was supposed to alleviate the fact that we had tolls. Years ago, maybe in the 70s, I believe, we had tolls in Connecticut, and we removed tolls with the assumption that we were going to tax the gas, right? So we have the highest paying gas in the tri-state area, and yet now, not only do we want the gas to be high, but we want to, on top of that, put tolls here. And we can put tolls on truck drivers, right? But what about the spending? What about making sure that we are allocating our funds properly? What happened? Why are we allowing the government to spend wherever at its whims and then tax the residents for it? I think we really need to focus on making sure we are understanding our spending, reallocate some of our funds, making sure the DOT's costs on preparing roads and construction costs are in line and reduced. These are the things that we need to work on. And not just simply be like, okay, well, let's just get more money. Let's add more revenue by putting a toll in there, and not really consider the working families and everyone else that it's going to impact.
Anybody else on this, or we move on? We got a lot of hands up. Mr. Steinberg.
Well, what you've heard is really standard Republican misinformation dogma. The gas tax, we've lowered it in recent years. It doesn't cover our needs. People are driving hybrid vehicles. We're not generating nearly enough. I've been waiting for 10 years from a credible plan from Republicans. They're saying, we can innovate, we have an idea. Where's the idea? How are you going to pay for this? Stephanie's right, the number is huge. The acute urgency of this situation is huge. And we dither and we talk about we need to do things differently, we need lock boxes. There are no answers coming out of the Republican side other than extreme bonding, which I absolutely think is a terrible idea in this context. So I'm still waiting for something beyond dogma, beyond repeating the same tired old things I've been hearing for 10 years.
Mr. Stevens.
I was going to be blithe, but that's okay. Look, the Democrats are not letting the Republicans speak. They're not allowing them into the conversation until the very tail end of these type things. And again, I don't think once I've started off my statement with Democrat or Republican. We're here as local people representing our local authorities. Let me put on top of that autonomy again for the towns. You start putting tolls in just on trucks, they're going to be high. And where are those trucks going to go? They're going to take the end around on our local roads. Our town of Westport is already saddled with all the costs of taking care of I-15 and I-95. We pay for every one of those things. The state doesn't give us anything back. If we have trucks running through our local towns, we're going to be having big time problems on the post road and other places, more wear and tear on our roadways, and I don't think we're going to see much return there. We have got to find another way. There is another way. There's always another way. Nothing's impossible in the state.
Ms. Thomas, you had your hand up. Let's finish this one up.
Thank you. Jonathan already said most of what I was going to say, but when the gas tax was instituted, both here and in almost every other state, it was supposed to fund transportation, but this is a national problem for, as Jonathan mentioned, between fuel efficiency, all the wonderful people who are trying to not use cars as much because it's bad for our environment, you know, livable, walkable cities, all of these things. Like, every state has run out of money, which is why President Trump ran on this issue in 2016 of improving infrastructure at the federal level, because every state is running out of money. Now, he has not fulfilled that promise, but that's a subject for another day. I will leave it there. But we just keep, Chip, you say there are ideas, there are always ideas. I know I, for one, have always been listening, but I have to agree with my colleague, Jonathan. In the years that I've been involved in this political process, I've heard that there are other ideas, but I've yet to hear the idea other than bonding. So,
All right, well,
by the
thank
way,
you.
saying that,
Let's move on, Jonathan.
let me just say, saying that Westport is paying for I-95 and post-road expenses is not true. The state and federal government pay for those things. I don't know where you got that.
No, Jonathan, every time a fire truck goes out, every time an ambulance goes out, every time a police car goes out, when there's an accident, we take care of that. We don't get anything back on that. That's a big expense. It's also a threat on our departments, who, let's not go there right now, but our police deserve better. They don't deserve better than to have to put up with more trucks coming through our post road and some of our ancillary roads. Waze is gonna do it. Google's gonna do it. They're gonna send them through our town. And we can't have that unless we come up with a plan. And yes, there is a way to do anything. That's how this country got great. That's how this town has gotten great. We found ways to do things.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Again, not true. The state
I think we've exhausted
compensates
this
the
one.
town
Mr. Steinberg,
for those
Mr.
expenses.
Steinberg.
Not
I think
true.
we've exhausted this one. Let's move on. All right. So we've completed the first round of 4 questions. We have 4 more. The debates have been getting a little bit long, so I'll try to contain them a little bit more. But they've been good, and I appreciate it. So now we're going to Ms. Zucaro for the start of the second round. The question is: there is projected to be a multi-billion-dollar deficits in the current and future budgets. What are some ideas you would support for Connecticut to get through our fiscal house in order?
So this is a great question. You know, it's interesting because now with COVID, we have this nuance that is sort of taking center stage, and you know, Connecticut's serious fiscal issues haven't gone away. We're not able to pay for our essential social services, fix our infrastructure, and eventually lower taxes. You know, I would like to see, you know, strengthening some of our, we need to really cut spending and balance our budget. And we need to do that by putting caps on the pensions, increasing, you know, further wage freezes for our unions. We need to reduce the state's mounting budget. We need to help small businesses provide more jobs. If we could streamline businesses, we could allow more jobs to come in here, and we could increase our tax base. There's a whole series of issues and things that we can do. But I think once we have a more idea of what COVID is going to do, we can sit down again, look at all the facts, review how COVID has impacted our budget, and really address sort of these structural weaknesses that we have.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. 30 seconds rebuttal.
I'll go back to agreeing with Chip. I do think there is a way to do anything, but it does require sort of stepping outside of a comfort zone and, you know, being a little innovative. Sorry, see, I'm brainstorming as I go. But, you know, businesses are not one size fits all. And I'm thinking there are some trends that we can capitalize on right now. The gig economy, micro businesses. Oh, that's right, rebuttal, 30 seconds, sorry. I'll wait for the discussion, but there's so much we can do, and I'll talk about it more.
All right, Mr. Stevens, 30 seconds.
What we got to do is retain our businesses. Connecticut used to be a shining star with businesses, but then we had a governor that told GE, I dare you to leave for Massachusetts. GE moved to Massachusetts. We're currently about to lose Subway, one of our shining stars in the food industry. And it goes on and on. Our insurance industry is leaving the state. We have got to retain business and attract them back. How we do that, that's one of the long-term plans we've got to work on. Short-term, we also have a great wealth in this state. Dalio's helped us with education. Others have stepped in. We got to take advantage of it when it's put out there. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Steinberg.
So we have to support core businesses, which we have done, I think, fairly effectively, particularly precision manufacturing, helping create opportunities for young people who want a vocational opportunity path versus a four-year college. We have to support emerging industries like precision medicine and green jobs, which offer high-paying, good jobs and are part of the future of the state. The insurance industry is left for any number of reasons. We need to acknowledge that we have to differentiate ourselves and be an attractive place to do business, which has to do with transportation and housing and a lot of other things that no company is going to locate here unless we do an effective job addressing these systemic problems.
I agree.
So let me go back to what the question was, because you're actually answering probably the next question that was about to be asked, and I'll still ask about jobs. The question here was the budget is going to be in a deficit of over $1 billion over this year and next year. What can we do to get out of that problem? So let's.
I'd like to rebut that if I have a chance. Now that we're on the real question.
Matthew, choose.
Go ahead, Skip.
All right. Again, that was the answer to the question. Business pays taxes. Business attracts other business. Business attracts people. Right now, Connecticut's number 96 on the list of bringing people into this state. We're losing people here because we're losing business. The answer to the budget is to have people, not people tread on all the time. It's to have more business here, whether it's, any kind of business. I wouldn't be so quick to say green and, internet business. I hope we're not talking about taxes on, the electronic business. That would be crazy. But I think the state has to improve its standing with business to retain. We don't have a lot to retain, but to attract and bring people back. I think we can do that.
Mr. Steinberg.
I agree with Chip.
If I can,
environment very friendly.
Let her finish. Go ahead, Patrizia.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
no, go ahead.
With Chip, so we need to create a very business-friendly environment, and we need to keep them here and get new ones, right? We need to make sure that our tax base is growing, and in order to do that, we have to be more flexible, and we have to really invest in our businesses. And then once we are able to grow our tax base, then we will have more income, and we can then invest those in the things that we really need. We need to attract businesses to stay here and come here and stay here. And right now we're not doing a very good job of that. And then eventually when we grow our tax base, we'll be able to lower taxes and attract even more businesses to come here. And maybe high paying income taxpayers will also come here because we have work here, we have jobs, we have a place to live. And those are the things that are ways that we can work to fix our budget in Connecticut.
All right, Jonathan,
Well, first of all, I don't know how Connecticut ends up 96 on the list when we only have 50 states. What I'd like to say is we've done some really pretty impressive things. We have a $3.1 billion rainy day fund that was created because of work that I and others have done, with a volatility cap, a spending cap, a bonding cap, which have put our house in order and have put us in better situation than most states in our country during the COVID crisis. Yes, we have systemic issues. We brought those up. The pension things are haunting us and will haunt us for years to come. But I have an experience through my work on the Constitutional Spending Cap Commission, on the Pension Sustainability Commission. I know how hard it is to cut budgets. And I'm always intrigued by my Republican colleagues talking about how we need to cut fraud and waste, but have a real hard time identifying it specifically. Now, when we talk about balancing our budget, it's going to be all hands on deck, drilling down quite a bit. There are certain things we have to prioritize, like our healthcare and social safety net, on our education system. These things still need to be prioritized in the scheme of things. I've got the experience. I've been doing it for 10 years. Part of me hates the idea that I have to do it again, but at least you're going to have some experience to bring to bear when it comes to those hard choices.
All right, Stephanie, give you a few seconds here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that to answer the question, we definitely have to do everything. It's all about incremental when you're trying to erase a deficit. We are going to have to look at every budget, not just by category, but line item. I was noticing, because Connecticut has great transparency and all of the budgets are online, there are some costs that we might be able to solve by shifting to a preventative model versus an intervention model, whether it's inmate healthcare or, there's so many things in the budget we can look at. But we also, we are in the midst of a really good trend right now with people coming into our state. And we actually don't have until 2021 to plan for that. We have to start thinking about that now. I was brainstorming on the doors with someone just last week, and we both work in Manhattan, but we haven't been there since March. So we're thinking this is a great time. Like, let's get Advanced CT on the phone to woo some of the big corporations from Manhattan to have hub offices in Connecticut, which is kind of being talked about because their employees don't want to go all the way into Manhattan. They only want to go in 2 days a week. So maybe we can attract some businesses with a totally different model. And as I started to say, the gig economy and micro businesses are the fastest growing segment in the country right now. And even right now in this moment. So that's sales tax, that's income tax from people earning dollars. Like, let's incentivize all of those things. We're gonna have to do everything across every budget line and look at our tax codes as well.
All right, thank you. So let's sort of stay with job situation, gig economy, people who've lost their jobs and health. The question is this: with so many people out of work, this is to Ms. Thomas, with so many people out of work, what can you do in Hartford to help those that have lost their employer health care?
So much. Before the session closed in March, I was very much fighting for the public option bill that was up. In fact, my last public outing was testifying on behalf of that bill, I think March 6th. Businesses, as a business owner who works with nonprofits, the cost of healthcare has been one of the biggest issues for attracting talent, retaining talent, and just sort of moving people through the pipeline of my company. And I know a lot of other small businesses have the same problem. I spoke to a guy whose son couldn't work for his father's company because he had to leave to get healthcare. Like, that's crazy. I've heard about doctors' office workers who can't afford healthcare. Small businesses in Connecticut employ, or did before March, I don't know the current number, about 700,000 people. And about 400,000 of those have no health insurance. So in Hartford, we need to be sensitive to these people and make sure they have a way to buy into a plan, especially gig workers. I know the town of Wilton, for example, bought into the state system and saved $600,000 just this year. Small businesses and nonprofits hopefully can earn that same right.
All right, thank you. Now it's rebuttal. Mr. Stevens first.
Yes, again, I'm hearing a lot of, we have to subsidize, we have to tax, we have to support. Yes, we do, but we have to do it smartly. This is, again, comes back to the budget. This comes back to healthcare. We've got to think things through. On my P&Z commissions, we've always looked for unintended consequences. And what we're looking at here is throwing money and knee-jerk reactions to this problem. I think there are solutions. I think a lot has to do with working with our national representatives, but we've got to be very keen on what we do, what we can afford to subsidize and tax.
All right, thank you. And now we go to Mr. Steinberg.
Well, first of all, I spent a lot of my time as a state legislator helping constituents deal with the fact of lost insurance. We try to direct them to the state plans if it's appropriate. It's a real challenge for a lot of folks. And, this isn't about national politics, as my opponent says, but let's face it, if his party succeeds in invalidating the Affordable Care Act, 260,000 residents of Connecticut will lose their insurance. That's the equivalent of 9 Westports. So let's call it as it is. One party is in favor of adequate, affordable health care, and one isn't.
Right, so we're in an open discussion here. Anybody want to pick up on it? Ms. Thomas.
I just wanted to clarify, Chip. This plan that I was talking about is a pay-as-you-go. So it's basically, it's basically giving small businesses a group instead of having to pay very high rates for very poor care. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Stevens.
I applaud you on that. I think that's something that they've been trying to do for a long time on a federal level. Again, I'm not pushing back on affordable care. I think that's something that's needed. I don't think anybody's pushed back on affordable care anywhere. That's politics. I'm running on representing people over politics and political parties. And again, there are solutions. I am not going to give in to the fact that the federal government's failing us, and so, oh, what are we going to do? We have got to find solutions. The state's done very well with its healthcare programs, and I think that we've got to continue to support them in a smart and strategic way. I believe there are ways, there are paths to do these things. Nothing's impossible in Connecticut.
Do you support the public option?
I absolutely do, yes.
Mr. Zucaro. No, you're muted, Mr. Zucaro.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I actually think this is a really complex issue because there's so many factors to it. I mean, you have to look at not only the economy and making sure that we have a strong economy and we have resources available to put into these initiatives, but that at the same point, we need to make sure that we have a strong business environment, right? A business-friendly environment so that businesses can stay strong during these episodes in which it's really hard. I think we also have a strong public health in Connecticut. And I think we can also maybe look to see, investigate whether this would make sense, but we could look to see if there's any sort of private initiatives that could help with maintaining insurance for folks that are unable to have it because of they've lost their job. So it's a really important question, and there's a lot of things that go into it. And I think we need to evaluate all the aspects of it and come up with the best possible solution for residents.
Ms. Thomas?
I just want clarification. When you say private options to cover the uninsured, what do you mean?
Well, I'm talking like a private-public partnership, something that would allow individuals in the state to have insurance that necessarily wouldn't be available to them unless they have, employment.
So the state would be paying?
I mean, I haven't worked out all the details. I would have to do the research to see what makes most sense, but I'm looking for something that is reasonable for taxpayers. It's reasonable for people who don't have insurance, and we want to make sure that people are able to get health care if they don't have a job. So I would have to look at all the information and generate a reasonable plan that makes sense, and it answers this, and it's a solution that makes sense. And
Actually, we have that.
right.
The state, I think it's problematic because I don't think it's going to pay for itself, but we actually have created such a plan for people who can't get it through their businesses or through the public plan.
Yeah.
So it exists, you have to do your homework.
Is that Husky?
Right. The Charter Oak program exists, and it gives insurance, and it's very basic coverage. So there is insurance that does exist.
Hey, the devil's in the details. And if it's working, Jonathan, then I say we work through it, make it better. I think people should be allowed to find their own insurance if they can support it. I think local, medical groups offer different programs. I support them. And I think out-of-state insurance companies should be allowed to come into Connecticut and offer cheaper insurance.
All righty. I think that about exhausts that one. We've 2 questions left, and we've got about 15 minutes to go. So I think we're going to be able to fit it all in. So the next question is for Mr. Stevens. And that is, after the last big storm, we all suffered with power outages and long wait times for restoration. What can be done to assure that our public utilities are responsive to our needs and held accountable when they fail to perform?
I love this question. Years ago, not too far ago, we were all alive when it happened. This state sold its electrical generation plants. This state allowed our utilities to move out of state to be purchased. All of our utilities now, and soon to be conglomerate that owns our electric and water utilities, are out of state. We lose control. I hear people saying, well, we're going to do legislation that's going to make sure that they run the right way and they cut their, wages or their what they get paid. That's not going to work. We've got to take control of our utilities again. I don't believe that our local municipalities like Westport can have their own grid. I don't believe that they're going to be able to manage their own water system. We have those systems in place. Do they need to be fixed? Yes. Should there be more input by our local authorities? Yes. Should we be shackled when we have to have bigger water tanks or fix our electrical infrastructure? We can't. We've got to work together on this, and it's got to be the state taking back the state's utilities, the state's wherewithal. We can't allow Pennsylvania to manage a storm like the last one from there. You know, we all see the trucks coming from Maine, from New Hampshire, from down to Florida. That takes time. That takes a lot of money. We need to have plans ready to manage where we get our utilities from, how they're managed, and how they react to storms like we just had. We can do it. There are plans. I'm willing to work on one.
Thank you. All right, we start rebuttal. We start with Mr. Steinberg.
I don't know if my opponent missed it, but we just passed a bill last week that addressed a lot of the things that he brought up. But it's just the beginning. There's no excuse for Eversource's response to the storm, both communication and preparedness. I'm one of the leading legislators in energy policy in the state, and I recognize we need fundamental reform of our existing regulatory framework, which is not working for us and hasn't worked since deregulation. What we need is not only what we're doing now with the performance-based rate making, but we also need fundamental reform so that our utilities are only compensated for innovation and investment. Our grid needs huge investment. That's the only way we're going to be able to move forward and be competitive as a state. And we are just beginning with that long-term, significant systemic change that needs to happen. And I'm ready for that to happen.
Matt, if I could, Mr. Steinberg took an extra 30 seconds, Matt. He took an extra 30 seconds.
Hang on, stop. We're going through, everybody gets their 30 seconds. Mr. Zucaro, when we get to the discussion, Chip, you can have time. Go for it, Mr. Zucaro.
Okay, you know, it was clear that what happened after Storm Isaiah, that there was a breakdown in oversight for our utilities. And there was a legislation that was recently passed, and you know, I'm curious to see how it's going to affect ratepayers and what are we going to pay, and you know, what's going to happen as a result of that. And obviously too, I think we need to have more oversight over not only electrical, but I would also say our telecommunications in general, right? Our cable visions and our internet. During that storm, we were affected by those as well. We didn't have, you know, a lot of people were without. So thank you.
All right, Ms. Thomas.
I was listening to a famous economist recently, and they were asked, what could you change about anything over the last 30 years to help our economy? And they said, I wish we could have had a different conversation about antitrust in this country. These near monopolies are the problem. Yes, the Take Back Our Grid Act was a great first step, but I do think we need to look at autonomy for local municipalities. Here in Norwalk, we've had great success. My time ran out, Matt.
Oh, you're trying to stop abruptly. I thought you might want to finish. It's okay. Go ahead, Chip. I'm sure we'll get into. You'll have another moment to talk.
You know, again, it comes back to planning and looking at what you're doing. Yes, y'all passed a plan, you know, according to utilities, to give people $100 back if they lost food in the refrigerator. To look at microgrids in towns and things. Look, that's not what we need. We need an overall plan to look to take back the utilities as a whole, or at least get control of them. It's not going to work. Westport balances budget. If you're going to start throwing microgrids and the water system on top of that, the state's going to have to bail them out. Norwalk's had that for years. God bless them. It works. They've managed their budget well on that. But again, we have got to look at the bigger picture. We have got to look at how we can have more control over the electric. And yes, I agree with you 100%, our communications and internet industries, how we can have more input and getting things run more on a Connecticut basis than a Pennsylvania or a North Carolina basis. Yes.
Somebody else? Mr. Steinberg.
I agree with my opponent. Planning is critical. We need to empower PURA, the regulatory authority, with the ability to have teeth to penalize utilities. We gave that to them. And I welcome trucks from Pennsylvania and Indiana and even Canada, because they were here to help us, and that's part of the solution. But doesn't address the underlying problem we have. The idea of taking back the utilities, I don't know what that means. We have existing authorities that lack the ability to impose the kind of penalties and to, in real time, create the kind of responses that we need. we're working on that. It's going to take some time. There are a number of dockets at Pura that are addressing the electric grid. I can't wait for them to come back with their recommendations. The legislature and DEEP have to take advantage of that in terms of developing policy. We're on the right path. We just wasted decades getting to where we are today. And these storms are indicative of the fact that we have been asleep at the switch. And I've been yelling about this really for quite some time. I'm kind of an outlier on the Energy Committee. I believe that investment and innovation is critical to the state if we're going to compete on an economic basis. And our energy grid is not up to speed. We are well behind the times. We're not going to be able to take advantage of solar power, of smart meters, and all the different things that are right here on the horizon in terms of technology that we should be leveraging right now to help us become more competitive as a state and bring down rates. We have a long ways to go. I'm glad to discuss for hours the plans that I would like to put in place to address this kind of thing. I don't think we have that kind of time.
No, we only have a few minutes. So, Mr. Zucaro, do you have something to say?
Yeah, no, I agree with Mr. Steinberg. I think that the bill that was passed was probably a good start. I think that the new chair of PURA is gonna make strides for us, and I think it's something that we need to really look into. I'm really concerned about oversight and making sure that PURA has the ability to rein in some of these utilities.
Good. All right. So we got one last question, and it goes to Mr. Steinberg. How are we going to maintain tax certainty for businesses and residents? Tax certainty refers to the creation and maintenance of stable regulatory and policy frameworks for tax administration, taxpayers, and tax compliance. In other words, how are we going to keep our taxes stable?
A great question. I'm as frustrated as businesses that we've been all over the map when it comes to taxes. We're constantly proposing adding taxes, decreasing taxes, taxes that cost more to administer than we actually collect. Certainty is a lot to ask for, even for business, but we need some consistency. Unfortunately, the problems we've had with deficits and now with COVID creating new deficits have made it very difficult for us to balance our budgets, again, because of the pensions. I have opposed on several occasions budgets that include large tax increases that would have had a real negative impact on Westport consumers. The challenge we had is to get to a glide path where there's some sustainability. Some of that we've done in terms of smoothing out the pension costs year to year, but as we can see, we're still facing deficits in the future. It's very hard to find a lot of my colleagues who say, raise taxes on the rich, that's going to solve all our problems. That's not going to solve all our problems. We need a balanced approach. We need to find revenue sources that are appropriate, and we're going to have to do cutting of budgets. There's just no way around it. This is part of the equation here. So there are no easy answers, and I agree that once we make a decision on what to do with not only taxes, but tax credits, that we should remain consistent as long as feasibly possible so businesses can plan for the future and remain nimble and competitive.
All right, thank you. Ms. Zucaro, rebuttal.
Yeah, I think, the best plan here is that we need to make sure that we have, like you said, consistent business policies for businesses. And the thing is that businesses plan on a 5-year to 10-year basis, whereas the government is on a 2-year cycle. And so we need to make sure that we're planning for the future, that we're holding consistent tax structure and policy in a 5 to 10-year process so that businesses are allowed to plan for the future. They can build more offices, hire more people, and so forth and so on. And they can do that through future planning.
Ms. Thomas.
Yeah, I agree. I've not been in Hartford, so I'm not quite sure how that has played out in the past, but I do know from running a business that predictability is, you need that in order to figure out how you can grow, how quickly, and over what time frame. So anything that we can do to both get rid of nuisance taxes and make sure what we're doing is not penny wise and pound foolish, and build out that predictability, I know will help.
All right, Mr. Stevens.
Businesses need 3 big things. They need a resource of people educated and able to do their jobs. We have that in Connecticut. We have some of the greatest schools in the nation. They also need safety. They know they can operate safely, and they need infrastructure. My suggestion, defund Pura, fund the police. That solves 2 of those.
That's a jump, Mr. Stevens. I think Mr. Steinberg is going to have something to say on that one.
I believe my opponent just said he wants to defund Pura, which we have empowered with the ability to provide oversight and accountability for the utilities, that's doing the hard work of figuring out the future of our electric grid and our economy. I hope he misspoke, because that's the last place I would be cutting a budget.
I
If
don't
anything,
misspeak.
they're under-resourced and need additional staff to enforce what they already have on their plate, let alone what we've asked them to do. So I think that is a particularly wrong-headed approach. By the way, nobody's talking about defunding the police. We need to help the police be effective in dealing with every situation that comes before them, which includes a lot of the social kind of things, which are a real challenge for policemen to deal with coming forward. No one is talking about defunding the police.
Can I just say, I hate
Wait,
that.
wait, Matt.
Stephanie,
I was shortchanged on my
Chip
answer.
answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Number one, Pura is inefficient and doesn't get things done. You've seen how they've acted recently. I suggest we did what New York did when they defunded Lilco and they put in a new power authority out in Long Island. They are inept and they are causing us problems. In terms of the police, Mr. Steinberg, you voted for that bill. Fess up to it. You didn't talk to our local authorities before you did it, and now you're sitting with the consequences. So let's lose that act, okay? I think, again, I 100% support our police, our first responders. That's one point. The other point is, I don't think our infrastructure and utilities are being served well by Pura, so reinvent it there. That was what I was saying, and I didn't misspeak, and I stand by both of those.
Ms. Thomas. You're done? Ms. Zucaro.
I'm sorry, I actually don't remember what the question was.
Well, I think that the two of them went off on a bit of a tangent. We were talking about tax certainty for businesses and the residents of the state. If you want to weigh in a little bit more on that, get away from that other aspect.
Yeah, I think we've been talking about it, and it's just the importance here is that we need to reduce sort of government's overhead so that we can make sure that we are limiting our impact on businesses, so they have a good environment where they can grow and prosper, and in turn create a bigger tax base. More people will come to live here, and so yeah, I think planning is key, and making sure that we are informing our businesses and creating a structure where we're reducing red tape, right, and creating processes that are streamlined so that they can benefit for all these additional things and that they can prosper here. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thomas, you got a few seconds here if you want to weigh in.
I really just have to say, I hate the term defund the police, especially when our bill funded the police an additional $4 million, but I'll stop there.
All righty. Well, that's it for the questions. So now we're going to go to the closings, and we're going to go in the opposite order of the people who gave the openings. So we're going to start with 1 minute, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you to the chamber, and thank you to everybody watching. I hope I've made myself very clear. I'm running on 4 tenets, and I will just go over those really again. Local autonomy, anti-regionalization. I think our individual neighbors and ourselves, towns, do well on our own, and I don't think the state needs to step on us. Fiscal responsibility, we've talked about that over and over again. We can't just look at taxes or add in charges. We've got to look at cutting, and we've got to not say it's impossible. We've got to find ways. I think we got to look for accountability from our utilities, and I think having a new system outside of Pura will do something like that to recapture our control over our utilities in our state. And finally, full support for our police. Yes, you might have given them $4 million in funding, but you're going to be costing them way more in terms of liability by taking away their protection, and our towns are going to have to cover things like that. Our police officers want to be heard, and you see that every day in their pleas to the press in terms of backing people that back them. Those are my 4 tenets. I'm going to work hard to do it, and I look forward to other answers and future debates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Ms. Thomas.
Hi. I think the reason I got involved in politics is because I hate political sound bites, which we hear all the time. But I do believe there are ways to do everything, and I believe that because I've lived it. I started out with nothing. I have run businesses through 9/11, through the recession, through Bernie Madoff, which hit New York hard. I've started and grown a business from zero startup capital to 7 figures. I have led organizations from red to black. I have been tasked with chairing organizations that are responsible for being innovative and driving change. My favorite quote is, "Don't assume future politicians will have the courage you lack." I am courageous. I am a doer. I am about action. I'm not about BS in politics. So let's get back to governance and real people.
All right, thank you. Ms. Zucaro, 1 minute. You're muted.
Thank you again. This has been a pleasure. Connecticut needs change. For 40 years, the majority party in the legislature has been imposing policies developed on a national level instead of doing the hard work at home to develop specific policies to address Connecticut's issues. Connecticut is a very special and unique place with extraordinary natural beauty. It's a great location and very interesting people. At the state level, we need to focus on Connecticut, not a national party agenda. We need to focus on our businesses, providing streamlines. I've also had a small business and I understand the red tape that the state has enforced on us. We need to focus on our communities. We need to focus on our state's finances. I've lived here my whole entire life and this really matters to me, and I'm committed to ushering in change for Connecticut. Thank you again.
All right, thank you very much. And our last comment or closing, Mr. Steinberg.
Thank you, Chamber and the Library, for this debate. I found it useful. We live in extraordinary times. It's wrenching for so many Westporters and people across our state. And because of that, we need all hands on deck. And that requires experience and leadership skills to help bring Connecticut out of this pandemic as safely and quickly as we can for both businesses and consumers. I've been on the front lines working with the governor's office, with state agencies and colleagues, including those from across the aisle, in trying to address our healthcare needs. I've got 10 years experience dealing with budget deficits and trying to find creative ways from which we can balance our budget without hurting our most vulnerable citizens. I submit to you, this is the time to bring people to Hartford who have real solutions, not cockamamie ones like defunding Pura, but are really serious about addressing the problems that we have in Connecticut. If we do well by Connecticut, we'll do well by Westport. So yes, state issues affect Westport, but a lot of the things we have to do are addressing issues that thankfully don't address Westporters as much as other people in the state. That's what the job is really about. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Steinberg, Ms. Zucaro, Mr. Stevens, and Ms. Thomas. Thank you for your time. Everybody, remember November 3rd is the election day, and these 4 tremendous candidates are asking for your support. We will be hosting another debate on October 13th with the state senators. So please stay tuned. You can go to the Chamber of Commerce website to sign up. Again, thank you to the library, Jennifer Keller, for driving this today and also being the timer. This debate will also be, it has been taped and it will be linked to the Chamber website once we have it up there. So again, 4 candidates, they're wonderful candidates. It's yours to decide who you want to vote for, and you know how to do it on November 3rd. We will see you next week on October 13th. Thank you very much. Stay safe and good day.